So this is our staple meter box and the cause of a bit of discussion out in industry at the minute. Now this meter box is set up for different means in our training space, but it illustrates the kind of situation. You've got your little latch here. So I'm calling that a latch, but that's what it is. It's a GRP box. You can see they're a bit wappy and flimsy. And that is why these doors often end up ripped off. The occupiers, owners, leave the latch loose, they blow about in the wind, the door rips off. Anyway, this is somewhere that is reasonable to expect a consumer to come and read the meter. It could be a prepaid top-up meter that they come in to go and stick the little card in after they've been to top up down the shops. There's lots of people doing that in this country, and then they can also be wanting to operate the main point of isolation for the installation. It could be that there's an electrical fire in the house and they've run out and they want to turn everything off. They're in a bit of a panic, and that's where they'll do it. This is the key. So these are given to every property owner so they can have access to read their meter, and so they can have access to top it up, and also, if the main point of isolation is in there, to use it. So this is the bane of contention at the moment, and bone of contention, and I guess, do you view this as an electrical enclosure? And if you do, you can have terminations in here, so we can have some wagers, we can have our singles. As long as we're meeting the intent of basic protection within here, we can crack on. We can use it for all sorts. Let's go and have a look at the regs. So that was a quick whistle-stop look through a meter cabinet and some of the things that I think are important in how regs should be interpreted for that space in what we're doing as electricians. I wanted to reference back to a comment that was popped onto a post of mine by the NICEIC around this. I'd shared a picture of a meter cabinet with singles in after I'd asked the question to the NICEIC on the wire that they provided an answer for. They were good enough to do that. Really grateful that they took the time to answer my question and give a view on it. And they've commented here that during a recent live Q&A where we responded to a question regarding single insulated conductors in the meter cupboard, we did not review the installation photograph which you were showing, nor did we confirm that the installation shown is, as you have stated, absolutely fine. So now that is correct. They weren't presented with that image. That was an illustration of the issue there in the question. So factually correct, but irrelevant. What we did confirm during the live Q&A event were some of the BS7671 requirements for enclosures intended to prevent contact with live parts. These include the requirement to maintain the required degree of protection appropriate for separation from live parts in the known conditions of normal service, taking account of relevant external influences, and they've referenced regulation 416.2.3, which we'll come back to. And where it is necessary to open an enclosure, this shall be possible only by the use of a key or tool. Reg 416.2.4. It's the next one along from the first reg. We also stated that BS7671's definition of an enclosure, which is a part providing protection of equipment against certain external influences and in any direction providing basic protection, and confirmed that industry view, this is the industry view, not the NIC's view, that a meter cabinet falls within this definition of an enclosure. Now that is interesting because there is some other guidance that the NIC and others have put forward, which isn't the RAG, it's in Best Practice Guide 4, and it issues a C3 code to single insulated cables within a meter cabinet. So we'll come back to that in a minute, because there's quite a bit of contradiction around so much of this. They've gone on to say, as a UCAS accredited certification body, the NICEIC assesses businesses to ensure that their installation work meets the relevant standards and legislation expected to ensure safety. BS7671 is the British standard covering the requirement for electrical installations and is therefore a key standard used in all NICEIC electrotechnical assessments. As is stated in the front of every copy, it's the constant aim of the IET and BSI to improve the regs. Basically, write to them and tell them if you're not happy with something. So it says here, if you feel that BS7671 is ambiguous, inaccurate, or requires additions or alterations to ensure safe electrical installations, send your proposed changes together with rationale and supporting evidence to BSI and the IET for review and consideration. So that is the NIC basically dictating that the fact a meter cabinet is fine for single insulated cables isn't a them problem. It's the wiring regs have got it wrong, because the wiring regs say it's fine. I say that absolute nonsense. The wiring regs do not say that. The interpretation the NIC are making around those regulations is what's leading to that confusion. And that's a rather bold move and statement of theirs to basically say that JPEL 64 and the committee who produced the wiring regulations are telling us as electricians that meter cabinets are enclosures and we just need to provide basic protection in those areas. So if we look back to Best Practice Guide 4, which gives a C3 code, if that is the case, so if the wiring regs are telling us it's an enclosure, why is it a C3 if there's singles inside it? Would we give a C3 for singles inside some trunking? Would we give a C3 for singles inside a distribution board? Would we give if it's inside conduit? No, we wouldn't. So if the same applies, junction box, Wago box, whatever you want, if the same applies and that is true and that's how these regs are interpreted, why is that a C3? And in fairness to NAPIT, they've gone out with their own publications that are among the best on the market. I think that lots of the code breakers book, there's a cross of opinion around so many codes, you're never going to get agreement across all of them, but it's a good base point to look at and reference. And they do state that it's just their view, not necessarily the right view. They've got it as a C2, which I make as right. So we can look at the regs now, and this is kind of what the NIC have said on that post. They're basically saying that they see a meter cabinet as an electrical enclosure, and as long as you need a key or tool to get in it, that's what it is. So if we look at the regs, and they've referenced 416.2.3, which states a barrier or enclosure shall be firmly secured in place of sufficient stability and durability to maintain the required degree of protection and appropriate separation from live parts in the known conditions of normal service, taking into account relevant external influences. That last bit does it for me. But that's one of the things they're referencing. And if you think of a normal junction box, if it's a normally operating system and everything's rosy, there's nothing wrong with it, that is somewhere that you can have singles, you can have terminal blocks, Wago connectors, stuff that we need as electricians to house in a safe space away from consumers getting their hands on it. In normal working conditions. And your external influences, that's one of the things where they've come forward saying that if the door's missing from the meter cabinet, as is so often the case, that wouldn't be satisfactory to have single insulated cables on there, much like if the lid off your junction box had fallen off. It's such a very vague and wild leap to make that step that a meter cabinet is that. And if we're doing that, it opens it up to all of those other uses as well. We can't be selective on this. If this is a black and white interpretation of the wiring regulations telling us that meter cabinets are electrical enclosures, then that is what they can be for all conditions. We can have Wagos in there. We can put DIN rails in and terminals and breakers and whatever else we want, as we would any other electrical enclosure. It can't be okay for this little bit, but not okay for the rest. It either is or it isn't. It is that black and white. And 416.2.4, which is the other one that they've referenced, is basically saying where it's necessary to remove a barrier or open an enclosure or remove parts of enclosures, this shall only be possible with the use of a key or tool, or if you've got the power off, basically. And then the regulation goes on to say it doesn't apply to like pendants and bands and all the rest of it where we have live parts sticking out the ceiling anyway. So it doesn't count for any of those. They also referenced in to the definitions, which we're going to go to because that again is important. So it says an enclosure in the definitions of BS7671, page 35, a part providing protection of equipment against certain external influences and in any direction providing basic protection. So basic protection means you can't get access to live parts. So single insulated covering of your terminals, the appropriate IP values in front of any of your connections and such, that needs to be taken into account. So that is the definition of an enclosure. The external influences is such an important part of all of this because there's a big external influence to meter cabinets. And then the other one to reference back to is what the terminology is around basic protection. So it's just protection against electric shock under fault-free conditions. So again, your system's working, and we've got basic protection there, so no one can get a shock. So that is the summary parts of it. So the external influences aspect is twofold, really. One is, they're making that statement that so long as the door's intact and all the rest of it, and we all know from working out in industry that meter cabinets get damaged so often, and to put them on a par with a junction box with a lid that's screwed shut, or a GRP box that's weatherproof to IP67 sometimes, is just, it's a stretch. That is a real leap of faith. And I'm thinking, like, if you had meter boxes next to each other, so you've got all of the DNOs stuff in one meter style box, and we cut another one in next to it as an electrical enclosure, I still wouldn't be happy with single insulated cables in there if the key to access it is the same as this generic key that customers have to read meters, to use the prepaid top-up card, to use their main isolation point for a system. That is another external influence. We're giving access to that box and instructing people to go in there regularly and interact with the equipment in it at the point the system's handed over. It's where, outside of using the actual installation, internal, where you're plugging stuff in, switching it on and off, turning the lights on and off, if you're on a prepay meter, it's not unreasonable to think some people might be in there once a week, maybe more. Some people might be in there gathering meter readings, trying to cut their consumption. Not everyone's blessed to have smart meters today. I say blessed. It's still a question if we actually like them or not. And yeah, to just, that is an external influence again. People, ordinary people, unskilled people. And if we had a junction box that we're putting on the wall in someone's house, and we're saying, I don't know, inside it we've got a coin meter, for example, that is a property that's rented out to holiday makers. It's like, when you come in, you need to slip a few quid in the coin meter. We'll pretend it's 1995 all over again. And in that same box, we've got some singles running through it to the consumer unit above that meter. Are we happy with that? I don't think we are. And all of this is due to bad interpretation, and the RAG committee who provided an answer on that, in my view, got that badly wrong. And I think the step that should have been taken, and I don't know why it wasn't, was to just say, yeah, we got that one a bit wrong. And that's what can happen with committee-led decisions. And most people would understand that. Committee decisions are generally consensus, where no one actually gets what they want ultimately, and they come to this sort of shared view. And in fairness to RAG, if you go and have a look through all the questions they've answered, 99.9% of the time, I think you'd struggle to disagree with those views. They're really, really good, and there's lots of the common questions that get put in there, and it is industry people volunteering, sitting down to go through them and give a point of view. But I think sometimes when mistakes happen, you've just got to hold your hands up. But now we're digging. Someone made a point, I won't reference them because I don't think that's fair, but if the regulations are considered the flaw, and I've always argued against this kind of mentality anyway, I see them as a benchmark, a good one. If they're seen as the flaw and we're always working above it, if this is how we're interpreting the regs, we're actually in the cellar. And I would reference that and say we're in the cellar, and some people of industry are desperately digging ever deeper to avoid saying we got this wrong. And I don't get that. It's nothing wrong with being wrong sometimes. I often am wrong, very often, and I'll hold my hands up to it, say I got that wrong. There's people out in the social media space who do stuff consistently where they'll just double down on what they've said and refuse to admit that they made a mistake. We saw it with outdoor consumer units. We saw it with DC isolators. There's never any reference to it. And, respect is hard won and easy lost. And that is something that is happening here with me, with the NICEIC for sure, because I held them in great regard. I've said lots and lots of times on my content before that people in the NICEIC are doing some great work at the minute, much needed, because we've had this historical stuff with short courses and entry routes into industry, and the NICEIC were bad practitioners in that. There have been some internal acknowledgement of it as well without wanting to speak for them. And they've been key to getting a lot of that sorted out over the last couple of years, where we've seen the EAS toughened up. We've seen more defined entry routes to industry, what's actually expected of QSs now. the support for their members in doing skilled training to complete their MVQ3s and stuff. There's lots and lots of good work going on. But the whole thing traces back to what is an absolute nonsense for me. I just don't get it, because for all the debates and discussions we have in industry, and I love them, I'm a geek for all those chats about pen faults and about islanding and using steel wire armour on our PVDC cables and all the rest of it. That just falls to the wayside if at the very core concept of our regs, which are basically to protect property, persons and livestock in the event of issues with electricity. That's the fundamental thing we're trying to do, isn't it? And we're saying that a meter cabinet is somewhere we're fine to just have some singles out. I just think the rest of it is all a bit of a nonsense and pontification for effect. It shouldn't be that difficult to come out and say the regulations do not intend for meter cabinets to have singles inside them, and if you do come across it, it's a C2. And much like NAPIT have. And again, I don't want to speak for them, and they are involved with RAG, so they're in that RAG committee, but again, that's one of those where committee decisions are made and you don't know who's actually in on those conversations when they happen and if they've all been reviewed as thoroughly as they should be. And I'm sure NAPIT would say we maybe dropped the ball there with that going through at the time, and we didn't actually consider that or pay enough attention, you know. Again, speaking for them, I'm sure they would be happy to do that, because they do seem to own their mistakes when they do happen, and be a bit more, I don't know, a bit more understanding to the wider views of industry. And yeah, I feel this is a massive mistake by the NICEIC. And I'm again pleased that they have interacted on my content, and it's great that they're kind of getting involved in the social media discussion, and I don't want to totally dismiss that. I think that is really good. It's a key thing they need to do more of. But sometimes listening a bit more and understanding that they don't speak for all of industry. They are not industry. Electricians are industry, alongside wholesalers, suppliers, consumers. You know, it's a vast thing, and the CPSs and trade associations are a part of it. And I often refer to them as the industry of things, basically meaning NIC, NAPIT, ECA, ECS, all of the bodies of industry, but they are not the industry. They don't actually speak for all of us. They speak for themselves, and as a collective of committees of them coming together with some very, very clever people. But it's not the industry view, and I think it's got too used to being lectured at by a lot of these trade associations over the years as they've evolved. And it's like, oh, the NIC, they say that, so that's what it is. Why? It shouldn't be. We are electricians who call the shots on what we think, and putting a bit of confidence back into that is something that I try to do in my views and content. I'm quite happy to have different points of view around all of these kind of issues out in industry and not be fearful of that, because I don't mind being wrong. But yeah, there's definitely that lecturing at you kind of vibe behind all of this, and justification in the views they're sharing that the regs say it's okay. But again, to short summary it, if the regs say it's okay, why would it even be a C3? Bit of a contradiction there. And if it's a new installation, so this is fresh installation that's gone out, you can't have any defects. So why are you allowing your members to go stick in single insulated cables in meter boxes on their certification and not doing anything about it? Because we had that in our local area, that I had to work very hard with local building control and the DNO and the site developer to get all of those changed, 300 meter boxes of them. And there's a comment on that thread over on LinkedIn from another contractor who's got just the same 300 meter boxes like that. And it's the same sort of thing that will come back. And it's an absolute joke.